The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, and my mother's words echoed through the Thorne Estate dining room like a death sentence. "You ungrateful little bitch! You're destroying this family!" I stood there, my phone still clutched in my hand, the bank representative's voice still ringing in my ears. Account balance 0. Last withdrawal 48 hours ago. Amount $37,000. The entire college fund my grandfather had set up for me gone. Drained by my own parents while I had been eating ramen noodles for dinner and working 3 jobs to pay my tuition. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you want to understand how Thanksgiving dinner turned into a battlefield, how I went from the family doormat to the girl who sued her own parents, you need to hear the whole story. And trust me, it's worth hearing. So hit that like button, drop a comment below telling me if you've ever dealt with toxic family members, and subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was 22 years old, a senior at State University, and I was drowning. Not metaphorically. Financially, emotionally, physically drowning. Every morning I woke up at 5 to work my shift at the campus coffee shop. Then classes from 9 to 3. Then my second job at the library until 7. Then, if I was lucky and could find the energy, I'd study until midnight before collapsing into bed in my shared apartment that smelled perpetually of mildew and desperation. My roommate Sarah had asked me once why I didn't just ask my family for help. After all, everyone knew the Thornes. My grandfather Elias Thorne was a steel magnate worth hundreds of millions. The Thorne name was on buildings across 3 states. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Thorne, lived in a mansion that could house 50 people comfortably, but I couldn't ask. Because asking meant admitting I was struggling, and admitting I was struggling meant giving my mother another reason to look at me with that particular expression of disappointment she had perfected over 22 years. The one that said I was never quite good enough, never quite pretty enough, never quite worthy enough to carry the Thorne name. You see, I had been the family's invisible child for as long as I could remember. My younger brother Julian was the golden boy, the heir apparent, the one who could do no wrong. I was just Harper, the daughter who was too plain, too stubborn, too much of everything wrong, and not enough of anything right. I had learned early to make myself small, to ask for nothing, to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention came my way. When I got into State University, my parents had barely looked up from their phones. When Julian got accepted to the same school 2 years later, they threw a party that made the social pages. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was independent, self-sufficient, strong. I told myself a lot of lies back then. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I was working my evening shift at a downtown restaurant, my 3rd job, when my grandfather called. It was unusual. Grandpa Elias didn't call often. He was a man of few words, built from iron and old-world values. When he spoke, people listened. "Harper," his gravelly voice came through the phone. "You're coming to Thanksgiving dinner. No excuses." It wasn't a request. It was a command. And you didn't say no to Elias Thorne. "Of course, Grandpa," I said, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder while I wiped down table 7. "I'll be there." "Good. We need to talk about your college fund. I want to make sure you're managing it well." My college fund. I felt my stomach drop. My what? "The education fund I set up for you when you were born, $250,000, should be more than enough to cover your expenses with some left over for graduate school if you want." He paused. "You are using it, aren't you?" The table I was wiping became the most important thing in the world. I scrubbed at an invisible spot, buying time. "Of course, Grandpa. Thank you. It's been really helpful." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. But what else could I say? That I had no idea what he was talking about. That I had been killing myself, working 3 jobs because I thought I had nothing, that would lead to questions, and questions would lead to my parents. And I had learned long ago that challenging Richard and Eleanor Thorne was a losing game. I hung up and immediately called my bank. The representative was helpful, professional, and utterly devastating. Yes, there was an account in my name. Yes, it had been established 22 years ago by Elias Thorne. Yes, it had contained a substantial sum. No, there was nothing left. The withdrawals had started 4 years ago, right when I started college. Slow at first, a few thousand here and there. Then, larger chunks. The last one 2 days ago had cleaned it out completely. Every withdrawal had been authorized by Richard and Eleanor Thorne, who apparently had been listed as co-signatories. I sat in the restaurant bathroom and cried for the first time in years. Not because of the money itself, though God knows I needed it, but because of what it meant. My parents had looked me in the eye, watched me work myself to exhaustion, watched me lose weight because I couldn't afford enough food, watched me wear the same 3 outfits on rotation because I couldn't afford new clothes, and they had said nothing. They had stolen my future and let me believe I had nothing. And then they went home to their mansion, bought with money they had stolen from me, and slept peacefully. Thanksgiving Day arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies, as if the universe was mocking the storm brewing inside me. I borrowed a dress from Sarah, dark green and simple, because all my clothes were work uniforms or threadbare jeans. I drove my ancient Honda Civic, the one that made concerning noises whenever I went over 40 miles per hour up the long driveway to the Thorne estate. The house looked like something out of a magazine. Eleanor had outdone herself as always. Fall decorations in tasteful golds and oranges, a massive wreath on the door, the kind of elegance that screamed money without being tacky about it. I had grown up in this house, but I had never felt like I belonged here. I arrived early deliberately. I wanted to see them before they saw me. Through the dining room window, I could watch my family preparing for the performance. That's what these dinners were, performances. Eleanor directing the staff, making sure every napkin was folded perfectly. Richard checking his watch, already impatient. Julian on his phone, probably texting his fraternity brothers. My grandmother Evelyn, serene and kind as always, trying to smooth over Eleanor's sharp edges. And my Aunt Olivia, Eleanor's sister, who lived for family drama, like some people lived for oxygen. They looked happy, successful, perfect, and they had built that perfection on my stolen money. I walked in before I could lose my nerve. Eleanor's eyes swept over me, taking in my borrowed dress, my lack of jewelry, my simple haircut. Her lip curled slightly. "Harper, you made it! How nice!" The words were right, but the tone said what she really meant: "You don't belong here." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, keeping my voice light. "Family is everything, right?" We gathered in the dining room around a table that could seat 20 but held only 7 of us. Grandpa Elias sat at the head, regal and commanding even at 85. Grandma Evelyn beside him, her warm smile a stark contrast to everyone else's practiced expressions. My parents across from me, Julian next to them. Aunt Olivia had managed to snag the seat that gave her the best view of everyone, the better to collect gossip. The first course was served. Small talk was made. Eleanor complimented herself on the decorations. Richard discussed some business deal. Julian grunted responses between checking his phone. It was all so normal, so perfectly typical Thorne family dysfunction. And then Grandpa Elias raised his glass. "Before we eat," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade, "I want to make a toast. To Harper." Everyone turned to look at me. Eleanor's smile froze on her face. "Harper." Grandpa continued, his eyes on me, warm with what I thought was pride. "I'm so pleased that you've been able to enjoy the education fund we set up for you. $250,000 is a substantial sum, and I'm glad it's given you the freedom to focus on your studies and build a bright future." To Harper, and to the bright future ahead of her. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a bomb goes off, when everyone knows something terrible is about to happen, but no one can stop it. I set down my fork carefully. It clinked against the china, absurdly loud. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. What fund?" Richard choked on his wine. Actual choking, the kind where wine dribbles down your chin and stains your expensive shirt. Eleanor went pale, her foundation suddenly too orange against her blanched skin. Julian's eyes went wide, darting between our parents and me. Aunt Olivia leaned forward, practically vibrating with excitement. Grandpa Elias's expression shifted from warm to confused to something harder, more dangerous. "The education fund, Harper, the one I established when you were born. Your parents have been managing it for you." "Managing it," I repeated slowly. I looked at my mother, then my father. Richard couldn't meet my eyes. Eleanor's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. "Is that what we're calling it? Harper, sweetheart." Eleanor began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. This isn't the time or place. When is the time and place, Mom? I interrupted. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. When would be a good time to discuss the fact that I've been working 3 jobs, living on ramen noodles, wearing the same clothes for years while you two have been spending my money? We haven't been spending your money, Richard said quickly, too quickly. We've been investing it, managing it for your future. Really? I pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. Because I called the bank yesterday. Want to know what they told me? The table was frozen. Even Aunt Olivia had stopped smirking. The account balance is 0, has been for 48 hours, every penny gone, withdrawn over the past 4 years by Richard and Eleanor Thorne. Funny thing is, I never saw a penny of it. Want to know where I was 2 days ago when you withdrew the last $37,000? No one answered. I was at the food bank, I said, my voice hard, trying to figure out how I was going to eat next week because my paycheck went to rent and I had $12 left to my name. But please, Dad, tell me more about how you were investing my money for my future. How dare you? Eleanor hissed, standing up. Her chair scraped back violently. How dare you come into this house and accuse us of what? I stood too. We faced each other across the table, and I realized with a shock that I was taller than her. When had that happened? When had I stopped making myself small? Of theft, of fraud, of watching your own daughter struggle while you spent the money that was meant to keep her safe? We gave you life? Eleanor's voice was shrill now, all pretense of elegance gone. We clothed you, fed, you gave you a roof over your head for 18 years. We don't owe you anything. You're right, I said quietly. You don't owe me anything, but Grandpa does, and he put that money aside for me, not for you. So yes, actually, you owe me $250,000, plus interest. Grandpa Elias stood. When he stood, everyone paid attention. He was not a tall man, but he carried the weight of empire in his bearing. John, he said, using my father's real name, the one he hated, Eleanor. Is this true? The use of John instead of Richard was telling. It was the name Grandpa used when he was disappointed when someone had failed to live up to the Thorne name. Dad, it's complicated, Richard began. No, Grandpa Elias said flatly. It's not. It's very simple. I put money in trust for my granddaughter's education. That money is gone. Either you stole it or you didn't. Which is it? We borrowed it, Eleanor said, her voice desperate now. We were going to pay it back. We had some investments that didn't pan out, and we needed to maintain our lifestyle. Your lifestyle, I said. The words felt like they were coming from someone else, someone braver than me. Your 3rd vacation home, your yacht, your country club membership, your weekly spa treatments, all on my dime. I looked at Julian. He was staring at his plate, his face red. Did you know? I asked him. He flinched. Harper, I thought. You thought what? That. I was just naturally okay with living in poverty while you got a new car for your birthday, while Mom and Dad paid for your fraternity dues, your spring break trips, your everything. That's different, Eleanor snapped. Julian is, what more deserving? Because he's a boy, because he's pretty, because he knows how to kiss your ass. Grandma Evelyn stood up quietly and came around the table. She put her hand on my shoulder, and the gesture nearly broke me. She had always been kind, always been the soft place to land in this hard family. Harper, dear, she said gently, what do you need? What did I need? I looked around at the table, at my grandfather, his face carved from stone, disappointed but not surprised. At my grandmother, worried but supportive. At Aunt Olivia, who looked like she was watching the best show of her life. At Julian, who couldn't meet my eyes. At my parents, who had stolen my future and felt entitled to do it. I need justice, I said. I need my money back, and I need everyone here to understand that this isn't a family disagreement. This is theft. You can't prove anything, Eleanor said, but her voice wavered. I pulled a folder from my bag. I had printed everything. Bank statements, withdrawal records, emails between my parents discussing how to access the fund. I had spent all night compiling it, knowing this moment would come. I spread the papers on the table like cards in a poker game. Actually, I said, I can prove everything, and I will. In court, if necessary. Richard's face crumpled. Harper, please. We're family. We can work this out. No, I said. We can't. You made sure of that when you chose money over me. When you watched me suffer and said nothing. When you built your perfect life on my stolen dreams. I picked up my bag and turned to my grandparents. Grandma, Grandpa, I'm sorry. I love you both. But I can't stay here. Wait, Grandpa Elias said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Take this. Graham is the best attorney in the state. Tell him I sent you. Tell him everything. I took the card, my hand finally starting to shake. Thank you. Harper. Eleanor's voice stopped me at the door. I turned. She looked small, suddenly desperate. If you do this, if you sue us, you're out. Completely out. No more family. No more Thorne name. Nothing. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had given birth to me, but had never been a mother. This woman who had measured my worth in how little space I took up, how little I asked for how invisible I could make myself. Good, I said. The Thorne name means nothing if this is what it stands for. I'll make my own name. I walked out. Behind me I heard the explosion. Eleanor screaming, Richard trying to calm her down, Olivia saying something snide. Julian silent. Grandpa Elias's voice cold and final laying down some kind of law. But I was already gone. I drove back to my apartment through empty streets. Thanksgiving. Everyone was home with their families eating turkey and pumpkin pie, pretending to be grateful. I had blown up mine, and I didn't regret it. Not yet, anyway. Sarah was home having dinner with her girlfriend. They took one look at my face and pulled me inside. I told them everything. They listened, fed me leftover pizza, and helped me plan my next move. The next morning, I called Attorney Graham. His secretary tried to put me off, but when I mentioned Elias Thorne, I was transferred immediately. Graham's voice was sharp, intelligent, no nonsense. Miss Thorne, he said, your grandfather called me last night, told me to expect you. Tell me everything and don't leave anything out. So I did. Every detail, every dollar, every moment of watching my parents live in luxury while I starved. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a moment. This is a clear-cut case of fiduciary duty breach and potential fraud, he said finally. I'll take your case. And Miss Thorne, we're going to win. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved fast. Graham filed a civil suit against my parents demanding full restitution of the fund plus interest and damages. He hired a private investigator, a man named Malone, who looked like he'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. Malone dug deep. He found records of luxury purchases, vacations, renovations to the house, all timed suspiciously close to withdrawals from my account. He found emails where my parents discussed my fund like it was their personal checking account. He found lies, dozens of them, including the fact that they had told Grandpa Elias I was doing fine, that I had plenty of money, that I was thriving. My parents hired their own lawyer, of course, some slick corporate attorney who specialized in making problems disappear. He reached out to Graham with settlement offers. First 50,000, then 100, then 200 if I would sign a non-disclosure agreement. I refused every one. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the truth. The lawsuit became public record. A local newspaper picked it up. Then a bigger one. Then suddenly I was the girl who sued her millionaire parents for stealing her college fund. The story went viral. My phone exploded with interview requests, messages of support, and a fair amount of hate mail. The court of public opinion was divided. Some people called me brave. Others called me an entitled brat. Eleanor gave an interview where she cried on camera and talked about how hard it was to raise an ungrateful daughter. She made it sound like I had attacked her out of nowhere, like she was the victim. That interview was a mistake, because it prompted Julian to reach out to me. We met at a coffee shop near campus, the kind of place that was too trendy for my budget, but perfect for maintaining a low profile. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual confident swagger was gone. I didn't know, he said before I could even sit down. Harper? I swear to God I didn't know. I thought Grandpa was just being generous with me. I thought you were managing your money better than I was managing mine. I'm an idiot. I wanted to be angry at him. Part of me was. But looking at him seeing real remorse instead of Mom's practiced victim routine, I felt something soften. "You should have noticed," I said. "You should have asked why I was working 3 jobs while you were getting everything handed to you." "I know." He put his head in his hands. "I know. I was so wrapped up in my own life and being the golden child that I didn't look at what it was costing you. And when I did notice, I told myself you were just being independent. I told myself you liked being self-sufficient. I told myself a lot of lies because the truth was uncomfortable." "What changed?" I asked. "Thanksgiving dinner changed. Seeing you lay it all out, seeing Mom and Dad's faces when they got caught, seeing Grandpa look at them like they were strangers. And then that interview Mom did." He laughed bitterly. "She actually convinced herself she was the victim in this. She actually believes her own lies. That's when I realized how sick our family is." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. "I went through all my records. Every penny they gave me over the past 4 years, I documented it. Some of it lines up exactly with withdrawals from your fund. I'll testify to that if you need me to." I took the folder stunned. "Julian, this could ruin your relationship with them." "It already is ruined," he said quietly. "I can't look at them the same way. Every time Mom complains about how you're destroying the family, every time Dad tries to justify what they did, I feel sick. You're my sister. They hurt you. And I benefited from it without knowing, but that doesn't make it okay." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "I should have been on your side from the beginning," he said. "I'm sorry I wasn't." With Julian's testimony and Malone's investigation, the case became airtight. Graham pushed for a trial date, and my parents' lawyer started making noise about wanting to settle. But then in early December, something unexpected happened. The story caught the attention of a national news program. They wanted to do a feature on financial abuse within families, and they wanted me as the centerpiece. I almost said no. The idea of putting my story on national television was terrifying. But Graham convinced me. "Public pressure," he said. "Right now, your parents can hide behind their lawyers and their money, but if America sees you hears your story directly from you, they can't hide anymore." So I did the interview. I sat across from a sympathetic reporter and told my story. I showed the ramen noodles I lived on the tiny apartment I shared the 3 jobs worth of uniforms in my closet. I showed my bank statements, my school loans, my struggle. And then I showed the evidence of my parents' luxury lifestyle, the timeline that matched my suffering to their excess. The interview aired on a Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, it had been viewed over 10 million times online. The comment sections exploded. Other people started sharing their own stories of financial abuse of family members who took advantage of the special kind of betrayal that comes from the people who are supposed to protect you. My parents' friends started distancing themselves. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. Charity boards asked them to step down. The social consequence of their actions, the thing Eleanor valued more than anything, was collapsing around them. And my mother, true to form, completely lost it. She started calling me. First crying and begging, then angry and threatening, then some combination of both that made no sense. She left voicemails that were evidence of her mental state deteriorating. She sent texts that were unhinged, full of accusations and curses and a special kind of venom that only a mother can achieve. Graham saved all of them. "Harassment," he said with satisfaction, "just keeps building our case." The trial was set for January, but my parents' lawyer reached out in mid-December with a new offer. Full restitution of the fund plus 10 years of interest plus $50,000 in damages. No non-disclosure agreement. A public apology. It was a good offer. It was more than we had asked for. Graham advised me to take it. "But," I said, because I could hear the hesitation in his voice, "but if we go to trial, we could get more. We could get punitive damages. We could potentially get criminal charges filed. We could make an example of them." I thought about it for a long time. About justice versus revenge. About what I really wanted from this. "Take the offer," I said finally. "With one condition. The apology has to be at Christmas dinner, in front of the whole family. No more hiding, no more pretending." Graham smiled. "I'll make it happen." Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. Grandpa Elias had insisted on hosting dinner despite everything, or maybe because of everything. He wanted the family together, he said. He wanted closure. I drove to the Thorne estate for the second time in a month. This time I wasn't driving my old Honda. Graham had arranged for the first portion of the settlement to be paid early, and I had used some of it to buy a reliable used car. Nothing fancy, but something that didn't make concerning noises. I wasn't wearing a borrowed dress either. I had bought one simple and elegant, the kind of thing I used to see Eleanor wear to events and wish I could afford. It wasn't about the dress, it was about the choice. About being able to choose. The house looked even more elaborate than Thanksgiving. Eleanor might be publicly disgraced, but she still had her pride. Or maybe that was all she had left. The family was smaller this time, just the core. Grandpa Elias and Grandma Evelyn, my parents, Julian, me, and Graham at my request. He sat at my side like a shield, his presence a reminder that this wasn't just a family dinner. It was a settlement agreement being executed. Eleanor couldn't even look at me. Richard looked like he'd aged 10 years in a month. Good. We ate in silence for a while, or tried to. Grandma Evelyn made attempts at small talk that died quick deaths. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, Grandpa Elias set down his fork. "John, Eleanor, you have something to say to Harper." It wasn't a question. Richard cleared his throat, looking at the paper his lawyer had prepared. "Harper, we want to apologize for our actions regarding your education fund. We made poor financial decisions, and we should not have accessed money that was intended for you. We are sorry for any hardship this caused." It was wooden, practiced, meaningless. But it was also legally binding, recorded by Graham on his phone as evidence of the settlement. I waited. There had to be more. There was always more with Eleanor. Sure enough, she stood up, her chair scraping back. "Fine. There. We apologized. Are you happy now? Does it make you feel good to destroy your family, to humiliate your parents in front of the whole country? Eleanor, Grandpa." Elias's voice was a whip crack. "Sit down." "No!" She was shrill now, unraveling. "I won't sit down. This ungrateful little bitch has ruined everything, our reputation, our standing, our life. And for what? Money. Money that we were going to give back eventually, anyway." "When?" I asked quietly. "When were you going to give it back? After I graduated? After I starved? After I broke myself working 3 jobs when—" "We needed it!" Eleanor screamed. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain our lifestyle? Do you know how much pressure there is to keep up appearances? We were doing what we had to do." "You were doing what you wanted to do," I corrected. "There's a difference." "You selfish, spiteful, vindictive little—" "That's enough, Grandpa." Elias stood, and when he stood, Eleanor finally shut up. "You will not speak to Harper that way in my house. You have apologized as the settlement requires. If you cannot do so with grace, then you can leave." Eleanor looked at Richard, expecting support. He wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at Julian. He shook his head slightly. She was alone, and the realization hit her like a physical blow. "You're all choosing her." Eleanor's voice broke. "After everything we've done for this family, after all the years of service." "Service." Grandpa Elias's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You stole from your own daughter. You watched her suffer while you lived in luxury. You lied to me, to this family, for years. That's not service. That's betrayal." He turned to me, and his expression softened. "Harper, I'm sorry. I should have checked on you, should have made sure you were all right. I assumed your parents were taking care of you. I was wrong." "You couldn't have known," I said. My throat was tight. "They're good liars." "Not good enough," Grandma Evelyn said quietly. She had been silent until now, but her voice carried weight. "Eleanor, Richard, you are no longer welcome in this family's financial affairs. Elias and I have discussed it, and we're removing you from all family trusts, all business decisions, all positions of authority. You will receive a basic stipend enough to live modestly, but nothing more." "You can't do that." Richard found his voice finally. "Dad, please. We can fix this." "You can't fix betrayal. Grandpa Elias said flatly. You can only live with the consequences. Julian cleared his throat. Harper, I want you to know that I'm giving back everything they gave me from your fund. It's not much compared to what they took, but it's something, and I'm sorry. For all of it. I looked at my little brother who wasn't so little anymore. Thank you, I said. And Julian, you can still be part of this family. You can still have a relationship with Grandpa and Grandma, but you have to choose. You can't stay neutral anymore. He nodded. I choose you. I should have done it earlier. Eleanor made a sound like a wounded animal. Fine. Fine. If that's how it's going to be, then we're done. We don't need any of you. We don't need your money or your judgment or your self-righteousness. Come on, Richard. We're leaving. Richard stood slowly following his wife like a puppet whose strings were being pulled. At the door, he turned back. Harper, he said, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine regret. I really am sorry, for what it's worth. It's not worth much, I said honestly, but maybe someday it could be. They left. The door closed behind them. The house felt lighter suddenly, like a weight had been lifted. We finished dinner, the four of us. Me, Julian, Grandpa Elias, and Grandma Evelyn. We talked about real things, my plans for the future, Julian's decision to change his major, Grandpa's business. We talked like a family maybe for the first time ever. After dinner, Grandpa Elias pulled me aside. Harper, I'm proud of you. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to stay silent. That takes courage. I learned it from you, I said. He smiled rare and genuine. No, you had it all along. You just needed a reason to use it. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. Not for the settlement amount, but something else. For graduate school, he said. Or whatever you want to use it for. No strings, no conditions. Just a grandfather helping his granddaughter. I hugged him, this man of iron and old-world values, and felt his arms wrap around me. Safe, solid, real. The next few months were transformative. I finished my senior year with the weight of 3 jobs lifted off my shoulders. My grades improved. I started sleeping regular hours. I gained back the weight I'd lost. I looked in the mirror and saw myself instead of a ghost. I graduated magna cum laude. Grandpa Elias, Grandma Evelyn, and Julian were in the audience cheering louder than anyone. My parents weren't there. I hadn't expected them to be. With the settlement money, I paid off my student loans. All of them. The feeling of being debt-free at 22 was surreal. I rented a nice apartment, nothing fancy, but clean and safe and mine. I bought furniture that wasn't hand-me-downs. I stocked my kitchen with real food, and I started planning for the future. I had always wanted to start a nonprofit to help students from low-income backgrounds navigate college finances. Now I had the resources to do it. Graham helped me set it up pro bono because he said my case had inspired him. The Seeded Future Foundation launched 6 months after graduation. We provided financial literacy workshops, help with FAFSA applications, and emergency funds for students who fell through the cracks. We helped kids like me, the ones whose families were supposed to help but didn't. My parents' lives went differently. Without the family money, without the social standing, they had to dramatically downsize. They sold the mansion and moved to a modest house in a different neighborhood. Eleanor's name disappeared from charity boards and society pages. Richard took a job, an actual job, for the first time in years. I heard about it through Julian, who maintained a careful, distant relationship with them. He said Eleanor blamed me for everything, had rewritten history in her mind, where she was the victim and I was the villain. Richard was quieter, smaller, maybe beginning to understand what they'd done. I didn't care. I had stopped measuring my worth by their opinion. That was the real freedom. 2 years after that Christmas dinner, I was invited to speak at a conference on financial abuse in families. The organizers had heard my story and wanted me to share it with a larger audience. I stood on that stage looking out at hundreds of faces and told my story, the whole story beginning to end. The struggle, the betrayal, the fight, the victory, and the aftermath. I talked about setting boundaries, about knowing your worth, about the difference between family and relatives. Your DNA doesn't give someone the right to hurt you, I said. Family should be the people who build you up, not tear you down. And if the people who share your blood can't do that, then you have every right to build a new family from the people who can. The applause was thunderous. After my speech, dozens of people came up to me with their own stories. Parents who stole from their children, siblings who took advantage, spouses who manipulated. The common thread was always the same. They had stayed silent for too long because they thought family meant accepting abuse. I told them what I wished someone had told me earlier: you deserve better. You deserve to be valued. You deserve to have people in your life who treat you with respect and love, not as a resource to be exploited. Among the crowd, I saw two familiar faces. Grandpa Elias and Grandma Evelyn had come to watch me speak. When I reached them, Grandpa pulled me into a hug. "You're changing lives, Harper," he said gruffly. "Making a real difference. That's what the Thorn name should stand for." "I'm not using the Thorn name anymore," I said gently. "I'm just Harper now. Harper seated after the foundation. I legally changed it last month." I expected him to be upset. Instead, he smiled. "Good. Build your own legacy. Make your own name mean something. That's real power." 3 years after the lawsuit, Julian called me with the news. "Mom and Dad are getting divorced," he said. "It's messy. Eleanor is blaming Richard for everything. Richard is just trying to survive. It's like watching a house burn down and you know you should feel bad, but you can't quite get there." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not for them exactly, but for the waste of it all. The waste of potential of relationships of love that could have been if they had made different choices. "I'm not," Julian said honestly. "Maybe they both need to hit rock bottom before they can climb back up, if they ever do." He paused. "I'm proud of you, you know, for getting out when you did, for fighting back. You saved yourself, and in a way you saved me too. I would have turned into them if I hadn't seen what they really were." "You're not them," I assured him. "You chose differently. That matters." My foundation grew. We helped hundreds of students in the first year, thousands by the third year. I hired staff, mostly people who had been through similar situations. We understood what it was like to be betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, and we made sure no student who came to us would feel that way again. I was featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 for social entrepreneurship. The article talked about my journey, my lawsuit, my determination to turn personal pain into public good. The comments section was still divided. Some people praised me. Others called me vindictive, said I should have forgiven my parents, said family was forever. But I had learned something important not everyone would understand, and that was okay. The people who mattered, the ones who had been through similar experiences, they understood. They knew that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who hurt you. 4 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I was invited back to the Thorne estate for Christmas. It had become a tradition, just the four of us, me, Julian, Grandpa Elias, and Grandma Evelyn. Sometimes Graham joined us, having become a close friend over the years. Sometimes it was just family, the family we had chosen to be. We were in the living room after dinner when Grandma Evelyn brought up a topic I had been avoiding. "Have you heard from your parents, Harper?" I shook my head. "Not in over a year. Last I heard, Eleanor was living with her sister Olivia, and Richard was working some middle management position in Ohio. Julian has more contact than I do." Julian nodded. "Dad calls sometimes. He never asks for anything, just wants to know how I'm doing. He sounds tired. Old. Eleanor, though." He shrugged. "She's still Eleanor, still convinced the world wronged her, still waiting for everyone to apologize to her." "Do you ever think about reconciliation?" Grandma asked gently. I considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I remember that reconciliation requires two things: genuine remorse and changed behavior. I haven't seen evidence of either. Mom is still the victim in her own story, and Dad is still too weak to stand up to her or take real responsibility. Until that changes, there's nothing to reconcile." "And if it does change?" Grandpa Elias asked. "Then maybe," I said carefully, "maybe we could have some kind of relationship, not what we had before because that was toxic, but something new built on honesty and boundaries. But that's their choice to make, not mine. I've done my part. I've set my boundaries. I've built my life. The ball is in their court." Grandma Evelyn smiled sadly. "You've grown into a remarkable young woman, Harper. Strong and wise beyond your years." I had good teachers, I said, looking at them both. You showed me what family should look like, what love should look like. You never tried to control me or use me. You just supported me. That's worth more than any amount of money. On my drive home that night, I thought about how far I had come. From the girl who made herself small, who asked for nothing, who accepted crumbs of affection and called it love, to the woman who knew her worth, who demanded respect, who built a life on her own terms. The journey hadn't been easy. There were still hard days, days when I wondered if I had done the right thing. Days when I missed having parents, even toxic ones, because at least they were something. Days when I saw other families and felt a pang of jealousy for their apparent normalcy. But those days were getting fewer and further between. Most days, I woke up grateful. Grateful for my independence. Grateful for my work. Grateful for the family I had chosen and the family who had chosen me back. Grateful for the courage to say enough to draw a line to save myself. 5 years after the lawsuit, I received a letter. It was from my father, handwritten, not typed. The envelope had been forwarded 3 times before reaching me, as if he wasn't sure where I lived anymore. I almost didn't open it. Graham had advised me years ago to have all communication go through him to protect myself. But something made me open this one. The letter was short. No excuses, no justifications, just a simple acknowledgement. He was sorry. He had failed me as a father. He had let his wife dictate his actions, but that didn't excuse them. He understood if I never wanted to see him again, but he wanted me to know that he was proud of what I had become. He had seen the Forbes article. He had heard about the foundation. He knew I was making a difference in the world, despite him, not because of him. He ended the letter with a request. If I ever felt ready to talk, he would be willing to listen. No demands, no expectations. Just an open door if I ever wanted to walk through it. I put the letter in a drawer. I wasn't ready yet. Maybe I never would be, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a possibility of something different. Eleanor, on the other hand, never reached out. According to Julian, she had convinced herself of an alternate reality where I was the villain and she was the martyr. She told anyone who would listen about her ungrateful daughter who had destroyed the family over money. She never acknowledged her role, never questioned her actions, never changed. I felt sorry for her in a distant way. She was trapped in a prison of her own making, unable to see the bars because she was too busy blaming everyone else for putting her there. That was its own kind of punishment, worse than anything the courts could have given her. The Foundation's 5th anniversary gala was held in a beautiful venue downtown. We had raised over $2 million to help students. We had prevented dozens of financial abuse cases by educating families about trust funds and proper financial management. We had made a real, measurable difference. I stood at the podium to give my speech, looking out at a room full of donors, supporters, and students we had helped. In the back row, I saw Grandpa Elias, Grandma Evelyn Julian, and Graham. My chosen family, the people who had stood by me when standing by me was hard. 5 years ago, I began. I learned that the worst betrayals often come from the people closest to us. I learned that family doesn't always mean safety, that DNA doesn't guarantee love, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But I also learned that you can build a new family, that you can turn pain into purpose, that you can take the worst moment of your life and use it as a foundation for something beautiful. The seeded future foundation exists because someone tried to destroy my future and I refused to let them. The room was silent, hanging on every word. If you're in a situation where family is hurting you financially or otherwise, I want you to know this. You're not wrong for wanting better. You're not selfish for setting boundaries. You're not a bad person for choosing your well-being over someone else's comfort. And you're not alone. I looked at the students in the audience, young faces full of hope and fear in equal measure. Your future belongs to you, not to your parents, not to your siblings, not to anyone who thinks they have the right to decide what you're worth. You decide that, and if someone tries to take your future away, you fight for it. You fight with everything you have because you deserve a life built on truth, respect, and genuine love. The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation. People were crying, including me. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 19, and she looked terrified. "My mom has been taking money from my scholarship account," she whispered. "I just found out. I don't know what to do." I took her hands in mine. "Yes, you do," I said gently. "You know exactly what to do. It's scary and it's hard, but you know, and we're going to help you do it." I connected her with Graham's firm with our foundation's resources with a support network that would catch her when she fell. I watched her walk away a little straighter, a little stronger, and I knew this was why I had fought so hard. Not just for myself, but for every person who came after me. Later that night, back in my apartment, I looked at my father's letter again. I pulled out a piece of paper and wrote a response. It was short like his had been. "Dad, I got your letter. I'm not ready to see you yet. Maybe I will be someday, maybe I won't. But I appreciate you acknowledging what happened. That's more than Mom has ever done. If you're serious about change, about really understanding what you did and why it was wrong, then prove it. Not to me, but to yourself. Go to therapy. Do the work. Become someone different than the man who stole from his daughter. If you do that, genuinely do that, then maybe one day we can talk. But that's your journey to take, not mine to guide. I've spent enough years trying to fix things that weren't my responsibility to fix." I signed it, sealed it, and mailed it the next day. I didn't know if he would do anything with it. Probably not. People rarely change, especially when they've spent decades avoiding accountability. But at least I had said what I needed to say. 7 years after the lawsuit, Julian called with surprising news. "Dad's engaged," he said, "to a woman named Patricia. She's a therapist, actually. He met her at a support group for parents estranged from their children." "How do you feel about that?" I asked. "Honestly, good. She seems like a good influence. Dad seems different around her. Calmer, more self-aware. He's been going to therapy consistently for 2 years now. He's done a lot of work on himself." Julian hesitated. "He wants to know if you'd be willing to meet her. No pressure," he said. "But she's important to him, and you're important to him, and he hopes someday those two things could coexist." I thought about it for a long time. 7 years was a long time. I wasn't the same person I had been at that Thanksgiving dinner. I had built a life, built a legacy, built a version of myself that didn't need Richard's approval or Eleanor's love. Meeting his fiancée wouldn't change that. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll meet her. Coffee somewhere public. 1 hour. And Julian, you come too." The meeting was awkward at first. Richard looked older, grayer, but also somehow more present than I remembered. Patricia was warm, but not pushy, asking questions about my work, but not prying into the past. "Richard has told me about what happened," she said carefully. "I want you to know that I don't excuse his actions, but I also want you to know that the man sitting here now has done real work to understand why he made those choices and how to never make them again." I looked at Richard. "Have you?" He nodded. "I've spent 7 years in therapy, Harper. 7 years unpacking my relationship with your mother, my need for her approval, my cowardice in not standing up to her. 7 years understanding how I let her toxicity poison my relationship with you. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back those years of struggle. But I can promise you that I understand now why it was wrong and I would never do it again." "What about Mom?" I asked. "Have you talked to her?" "We're divorced. She has her sister Olivia, and that's about it. She's still waiting for the world to apologize to her." He shook his head. "I tried to get her to come to therapy to work on herself. She refused, said everyone else was the problem, not her. That's when I realized I couldn't save her. I could only save myself." We talked for 2 hours, not 1. By the end, I didn't have a father-daughter relationship with Richard, but I had something. An understanding, maybe. A tentative connection. A possibility. "I'm not ready to call you Dad again," I told him honestly. "I'm not ready for you to be a big part of my life, but I'm willing to try this. Coffee sometimes. Updates on our lives. Maybe holidays eventually. But it has to be on my terms with my boundaries, and you have to respect that." "I will," he said, and there was something in his eyes that looked like genuine remorse. "I will respect anything you need, Harper. You owe me nothing. If you give me a chance at any kind of relationship, that's more than I deserve." I left that coffee shop feeling strange. Not fixed, not healed completely, but something shifted. Like a door I thought was sealed forever had opened just a crack, letting in a sliver of light. Eleanor never changed. According to Julian, she spiraled further into bitterness and blame. She went through a series of jobs, unable to keep any of them because she couldn't get along with anyone. She burned bridges with friends, with family, with anyone who refused to validate her victim narrative. The last I heard, she was living alone in a small apartment, still convinced that everyone else was wrong and she was right. Still waiting for an apology that would never come. Still unable to look in the mirror and see her own responsibility. I felt nothing when I heard that. Not satisfaction, not sadness, not anger. Just nothing. She had become irrelevant to my life, a cautionary tale rather than a main character. 10 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I stood on another stage. This one was bigger, more prestigious. I had been invited to give a TED Talk about financial abuse and family trauma. I wore a designer suit paid for with money I had earned. I stood confidently, no longer the girl in the borrowed dress eating ramen noodles. I had become someone I was proud of, someone who had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and transformed it into a force for good. Justice comes slowly, I said to the audience, but it comes, and sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building a life so full, so purposeful, so genuinely happy that they can't touch it. It's becoming someone they can't hurt anymore, not because you're harder, but because you're whole. I looked directly into the camera, thinking of every person watching who might be in a situation like I had been. You deserve more than crumbs. You deserve more than conditional love. You deserve more than being someone's resource to exploit. And if the people in your life can't give you that, then you have every right to walk away and find people who can. Family is not a prison sentence. It's not a debt you can never repay. It's supposed to be a shelter, a support, a source of strength. And if it's not, then you're allowed to leave. The talk went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. My inbox flooded with messages from people sharing their own stories, thanking me for giving them permission to set boundaries, to walk away, to choose themselves. Among those messages was one from an unexpected source. It was short-sent from an email address I didn't recognize. I saw your TED Talk. You were right about everything. I'm sorry it took me 10 years to see it. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. Eleanor. I stared at that message for a long time. It was the first acknowledgement, the first hint of accountability I had ever received from my mother. It was 10 years too late. It didn't change anything, but it was something. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She had made her choices and I had made mine. Maybe she had finally started to see the truth, or maybe this was another manipulation. I would never know, and it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the life I had built, the foundation that had helped over 10,000 students, the boundaries I had set and maintained, the family I had chosen, the relationship I was slowly, carefully rebuilding with my father, the unshakable knowledge that I was worth fighting for. On the 10th anniversary of that Thanksgiving dinner, I hosted my own celebration. Not a dinner, but a fundraising gala for the foundation. The ballroom was packed with donors, students, supporters, and people whose lives had been changed by our work. Grandpa Elias, now 95 and still sharp as ever, gave a speech about how proud he was of me. Grandma Evelyn cried happy tears. Julian, now a successful architect who had found his own path separate from our parents' expectations, raised a toast to the bravest person I know. Graham, who had become one of my closest friends, announced a major donation to the foundation in honor of our 10 years of work. And Richard was there, in the back with Patricia, his wife of 3 years. We had built something small but real over the years. He wasn't my dad, not in the traditional sense, but he was someone who had acknowledged his mistakes, done the work to change, and respected my boundaries. That was enough. I stood at the podium looking out at this room full of people who supported me, believed in me, and fought alongside me for a world where no one would have to go through what I went through. 10 years ago, I said I was eating ramen noodles and working 3 jobs because the people who were supposed to protect me chose to exploit me instead. Today, I'm standing here in this room, surrounded by people who chose me, who supported me, who believed me when I said I deserved better. I paused, feeling the weight of the moment. This foundation exists because I refused to let theft be the end of my story. I refused to let betrayal define me. I refused to shrink myself to make others comfortable. And because of that refusal, 10,000 students have received help. 10,000 futures have been protected. 10,000 people know that they matter, that they're worth fighting for, that justice might be slow, but it's possible. The room erupted in applause, but I wasn't finished. If you're listening to this and you're in a situation where family is exploiting you, abusing you, or treating you as less than you deserve, hear me now. You are worth so much more than they tell you. Your future is yours. Your boundaries are valid. Your pain is real. And your decision to protect yourself is not only okay, it's necessary. I smiled, feeling the tears on my cheeks, but not caring. Justice came for me. Slowly, painfully, but it came. And it can come for you too. You just have to be brave enough to fight for it. You just have to believe that you deserve better, because you do. God, you really do. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People were crying, including me. After my speech, dozens of people lined up to talk to me, to share their stories, to thank me for speaking their truth. Among them was a young woman about 22 wearing a borrowed dress and looking nervous. She reminded me so much of myself 10 years ago that it hurt. "I'm Harper," I said, shaking her hand. "I know," she whispered. "I read about your story. My parents are doing the same thing to me, taking my scholarship money. I'm working 2 jobs and failing classes because I'm so tired. I don't know what to do." I put my hands on her shoulders and looked her in the eyes. "Yes, you do. You absolutely know what to do. It's terrifying and it feels impossible, but you know. And I'm going to help you. The foundation is going to help you. You're not alone. Not anymore." She started crying, and I held her while she did, because I remembered being her. I remembered feeling so alone, so helpless, so convinced that this was just how life was supposed to be. But it wasn't. And now, because I had fought, because I had refused to accept less than I deserved, this girl wouldn't have to fight alone. None of them would. That night, after the gala ended and everyone went home, I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea and thought about the journey. From victim to survivor to thriver. From the girl who made herself small to the woman who took up space unapologetically. From powerless to powerful. The poisoned seed fund had nearly destroyed me. But instead, it had planted something else, something stronger, a determination to never let anyone treat me as less than I was worth, a commitment to helping others do the same, a legacy built not on exploitation, but on empowerment. My parents had tried to steal my future. Instead, they had given me a purpose, and that I thought sipping my tea and looking out at the city lights that was the sweetest revenge of all. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where family, friends, or partners took advantage of you, where love felt conditional and respect felt earned rather than given, where you made yourself smaller to make others more comfortable? Drop a comment below and share your story. You might be surprised how many people understand exactly what you're going through. And if my story resonated with you, if it gave you courage or hope or validation, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories like this. Because the truth is, we're not alone in these experiences. We're not dramatic or selfish or ungrateful for demanding better. We're just human beings who finally decided we were worth fighting for. And that's not just okay. That's powerful.